Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and today we are very excited to have with us Dana Bookman. Dana is the founder of Canadian Girls Baseball. Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited that you're with us today from Toronto to share all of the information about Canadian Girls Baseball, but I want to kind of go back and take a look at your childhood and find out what got you excited about sports.
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you. I never started in baseball. Baseball was not my sport, but I was, I grew up with lots of school sports. I played a little bit of hockey, some basketball. I did a lot of individual sports, so a lot of tennis and horseback riding, and those kinds of. I was a sailor. I taught sailing for much of my younger adult life, and that was my sport history.
So when you go back and think about where you developed the passion for sports, which one of those was the one that really got you excited and engaged with sports?
I would actually say that it wasn't until I had kids that I got excited about sports. I always played, I was always a very active person, but I was never really passionate about sports until I had kids and they got involved more in team sports, and that kind of ignited something for me. It wasn't about my active sport history that did it for me.
So when you look at that step and working with your kids and the team sports that they were participating, what flipped that switch? What made that change? Because that's unusual. A lot of times people that get involved with their kids' sports, it's because that's something they've had a passion about, or they see their kids enjoying and the energy from their kids participating in the sport. So what flipped that switch for you?
Well, that was it for me. I have two kids, and my son and daughter are a year apart. And my son started playing baseball. And when he tried a bunch of sports before baseball. He was into soccer and he tried a little bit of hockey. But when he found baseball, his enthusiasm was really overwhelming for all of us. My daughter got into baseball. We did it every single weekend. Like, he was just super passionate about it. And a lot of that transferred to me. It was a passion for him in his sport. And then that carried over to my daughter, who also got involved in baseball. And then it became a passion for her in her sport because they were passionate about it themselves. So as a parent, I can give in or give up. And so I gave in and I joined them and, love to watch them play.
So when you look at that passion, your kids are still relatively young. What age did they start playing baseball?
So my son started when he was 6 or 7 years old. He started in t-ball, but we had played in the park before that. So my daughter likes to say that she started playing at age 2 because she kind of did. I mean, we were throwing balls around at that time. And then when my son was 8, he joined a AAA, like more a competitive team. And baseball became what we did all summer, every summer. And then my daughter followed in his footsteps and started playing when she was 6 as well.
So they're both going up that chart in baseball, getting more active and engaged with the sport and everything else. Most parents are happy to follow their kids, see the success, take them around, go get ice cream after the game. What led you to start Canadian Girls Baseball?
So, I mean, it comes right from that. My son played ball. My daughter wanted to be just like her brother and, also just had a true love for the game herself. So when she became 6, I put her in the same league that he had joined when he was 6. And she played that year. She was the only girl in her age division. There were 400 kids and she was the only girl. And At the end of it, she said, I don't want to play anymore. And when I figured it out and talked to her for a while, it was because she was the only girl. So I looked around for a girls' league, and there wasn't a girls' league that we could find. So I just put a note out on my Facebook page asking if friends wanted to bring anybody to the park and play with us. And we'd get uniforms and a coach, because again, baseball wasn't really my sport. And we planned the whole thing, and I was hoping for 5 girls. And when we got 5, I thought maybe we'll get 10 and we can play a little infield game with them. And then 44 girls came out that year. And so to me, that kind of blew my mind. And we decided to do it again the next summer in 2017, and 350 girls came out just by word of mouth and, some Facebook posts. So I realized then that lack of opportunity was the reason that these girls weren't playing. It wasn't lack of interest.
Well, I think you hit on a key point, which is if they've never been invited and nobody's asked them to come and participate, then why would they be part of that? I think it's interesting. You talk about hoping you were going to get 5 or 10 girls to be able to have a mini game, right? And you got 44 in that first year. And I think that, as you said, opens your eyes. But then the jump from there to 350 is really an enormous rise in terms of participation.
Yeah, it was 840% in 1 year. And I mean, again, sports is not my background. Baseball is not my background. And, I'm a journalist by trade. So it was a huge learning curve for me. Because I realized that the opportunity was missing for so many girls, and journalism is my background, so I can produce things. So I decided we're just going to make this bigger. We're going to grow across the country. We're going to offer this to as many girls as possible. And in 2019, which was our last real year before COVID hit, we had 1,500 girls playing across the country. So we went from 44 girls to 1,500 in 3 years, which is a pretty big jump.
That's a huge jump. And that's a huge strain on resources, right? To get that up and running. Dana's sitting there with the Facebook post and organizing a few things locally. To go from 44 to 1,500 takes an entirely different set of skills and resources. So talk a little bit about how you managed that growth.
Well, at first it was just me. And I would ask people, I had in our first year a couple of coaches. Canada has provincial teams and women's national team. The States has a national team, I know, but so similar. And so I had reached out to different teams and different, resources that I had through my son's baseball, and had some coaches join us. So as we expanded, I guess we just expanded that network and reached out in different provinces to different, we have provincial sport bodies. So like states, each province has its own baseball organization. And so I reached out to them directly and partnered with some of them and asked them, to help us provide this opportunity. And so they would, sometimes send a letter to their members, letting them know that we were coming into the province, or help us book field times, or tell us where to book a field, and then get the word out to some coaches, to some younger women, to see if they wanted to coach with us. So it was a step-by-step process. And I think I made a lot of missteps on the way. I still am. We're still growing. We're opening in a lot of new locations this summer. Fingers crossed. In Canada, we're still a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of the COVID opening up stuff. So hopefully we'll be able to open, but our numbers are building in those new places. So everywhere we go, we have somebody new who's helping us in the area, and we're getting a lot of registrations, which is great.
Well, as you said, you didn't have the background or experience running an organization like this. It's a very different environment, as you said, from being a journalist. But Sounds like you're being pretty hard on yourself with growth from 44 to 1,500. You talk about missteps. So as you look back, one of the things that's interesting for other organizations is to learn as they get started, what could they do differently? So now that you're looking back on, at least 3 or 4 solid years before COVID, and you talk about your missteps, what would you say those were?
I think, I mean, one of my biggest um, missteps was to give away too much stuff. So girls really like swag. We know that. I also know that, having baseball equipment or having access to it can be a barrier for girls in sports. Even if they're wealthy, it's just the idea of having to go out and get everything. So in our first couple of years, I would include everything with our small registration fee. They would get a baseball bag and a bat, and they would get their full uniform, jersey, hat, and pants. And then the next year, when they didn't need a bag and a bat anymore, I gave them a hoodie, and all of those things cost so much money, and our registrations were so low. So there was no money coming in to build our programs in other places. Like, we could sustain our program where we were, but there was no profit coming in to help expand in other places. That was one of my biggest. And then I think the other thing was communication issues. We got really big really fast. And although I had the best intentions of, it wasn't communicating with the players and their families, that was fine, but communicating with organizations, especially those provincial organizations who considered us partners, and we went in, working with them, but we were really on our own running the program. So I think I kind of was on the back burner, letting them know how we were doing and who our players were and how many players we had, and those kinds of communications. I think that they sort of felt left out of the conversation a little bit. But really it was just because it was so overwhelming. So I think knowing when you're overwhelmed before you get to the point where you have to sit under your kitchen table and cry is probably like a good lesson.
Well, it's hard. And as a journalist, you obviously have high standards for communication in terms of your expectations of what that looks like. So you know what it needs to look like. And I think it's challenging for most new organizations to build that infrastructure and build all of the communication channels and manage the whole process of everything. Because, as you said, you go in with these good intentions and you want to give all of the girls equipment and bats and everything, but that gets expensive quickly. And then that next year, they don't necessarily need all new equipment, and it doesn't make sense in the context of the fees that you're charging to be able to do that. But it's great that you were able to recognize those things quickly and identify them as a way to make some changes. So as you've grown, where does that financial support come from to allow you to expand the programs?
That is a good question. So in Canada, we have a funny system where we can be a not-for-profit, but a not-for-profit is not the same as a charity. So a charity can get a lot of donations and it can issue tax receipts. We run into the issue where sport organizations in Canada cannot become charities. So we're not eligible for a lot of the big money that organizations or companies give to charities. So banks, for example, would have, charitable dollars earmarked as part of what they do, and we can't access that. So there are some grants that we can access, which, there's one pie and only so many pieces, and there's a lot of people asking for money. We can take individual donations. So if anybody wants to donate, hi. And we can partner with organizations. So it's funny because even though we're one of the largest girls baseball leagues in the world, I'll say we are the largest because we're one of the only ones. We are still so small that marketing dollars, don't always make sense to partner with us, even though we are small but mighty. So we have a lot of issues. We charge a registration fee, but a lot of our programming, we subsidize players. and if they need to be subsidized. And we also offer a lot of programming in underserved areas for free. So we try to balance all of those things and use our registration fees to pay for, new programming that's opening up. But that is one of our challenges that I'm still trying to understand.
Well, it sounds like a big hurdle, as you said, if you can't be classified as a charity and therefore not eligible for a lot of that support and resources. How do they distinguish in that system between you can be a not-for-profit? So you said you can take individual donations. And that means that that's tax deductible for the individuals?
No, we can take money from anybody, but we can't issue a tax receipt to anybody. So we can take donations from anybody who wants to give us donations. We just can't give tax receipts, which often is, hinders companies who have larger sums of money and are donating for tax benefits. They're not going to donate to a not-for-profit. In Canada, a not-for-profit just means that the money that you collect as profit goes back into your company and is used for the purpose of what your company is for. And then it also means that if your company dissolves, any money that's left over goes back to the government. It doesn't go into somebody's pocket.
Sure.
It's a bit of a complicated system, and we're trying to become a charity, but the process is long and very expensive and kind of arduous. So under the girls empowerment umbrella, as opposed to the sport piece. So we'll see. Fingers crossed. Cross all your parts.
Well, it's interesting that they won't allow sport organizations to be classified as a charity, because as you talked about, if you put it under the girls empowerment umbrella, in a sense, it's really form over substance, right? You're putting a different label on it so that it can fit with being a charity, and you're really doing the same thing. And that's something that's always frustrated me with any type of regulations and restrictions. The US has a similar system somewhat. You can be a nonprofit and just get yourself set up as a nonprofit, but in order to be considered a public charity, you have to file under 501c3 of the IRS code to be able to take and give those deductions and everything else. But the challenge is, how do you go through the process and do that? And it doesn't sound like it's as expensive or arduous in the US. It's a filing and fees and things, and it takes a number of months for get the approval. But there don't seem to be the same restrictions on sport organizations. There's a lot of sports organizations that are nonprofits.
Yeah, it's too bad. They changed the system. I think there was a lot of, people, I don't know, misusing certain things. So they changed it to make it more difficult, but we'll see. Hopefully the process is about a year or a year and a bit to become a charity. And, hopefully it will work for us. Sometimes you have to apply a couple of times, so it takes a couple of years because you have to change something in your application. It's a bit funny, but we're hopeful.
Well, that is a long process, and especially frustrating if you can't really make the plans or access the resources that you want to use to grow. So while that's in the works and in development, then what is the best way for you to continue to gather the resources? What would be useful for you, whether it's from people from our network or others that might be able to help support the work that you're doing?
I think in my dream world right now, what would be amazing, and what has been great from some people, is those individual donations are a big deal for us, or sponsoring a team, which is 400 Canadian dollars per team, or sponsoring a girl who can't afford to play, which is, again, it's $200 Canadian. And then the other thing is that I would love to see is to partner with an organization that can sponsor us, basically, like a larger company, like a sporting goods company or a sports drink company, or something that makes sense for our players who supports girls in sports and understands that for all girls in sports, and baseball especially, because we're building this from scratch kind of, that the struggle is real. And I think it would have to be somebody's passion project as opposed to something that they think of as the best investment of all time. But I think we're a good investment because we're growing. We have a broad reach in terms of who's listening to us. We don't have tons of players, but we've got tons of support from, I mean, we're partners with Major League Baseball. We're partners with the Blue Jays Foundation, Jays Care. We're partners with Rawlings Baseball. None of that is necessarily a financial partnership, but it does mean that we have, we're in that network, we have that reach, we have that audience. So I hope that somebody listening might want to, give me a call. I'm available.
Well, those numbers that you referenced, $400 to sponsor a team or $200 to sponsor a girl, certainly are not huge investments. And I think that I would encourage our listeners to think about what they can do and participate in that fashion. You mentioned partnerships with MLB, the Blue Jays, Rawlings, and that they're not necessarily financial partnerships. So help us understand what kinds of things they're doing to support your mission.
So Jays Care has supported us for a few years. We did have some funding from them, which is now not happening anymore. They've shifted their focus to COVID relief. But we're still partners with them in terms of strategy, in terms of coach training. They work with us. We've done a lot with them this year because we're offering some of our programming virtually, and they've done a lot of work in that area. So they've helped us a lot. We can reach out to them, in terms of what that looks like and how we can best address some of, if we have issues in any way. So we work with them. And then with MLB, we're part of their RBI umbrella, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of their RBI program. And now they've expanded that to include girls programming. So again, it isn't a financial sponsorship. Last year, they sent us equipment, which was really helpful and will help us this year as we open new locations. And with Rawlings Canada has been great. We have they give us a small credit every year. They give us some of their, better pricing on equipment and a credit that we can use towards that equipment each year for 3 years. So that's our deal now. They've been great to us. So it's just sort of building that up and taking advantage as much as possible. A lot of organizations like Under Armour, for example, will give us some of their preferred pricing, which is great. We just haven't sort of made that connection in terms of financial commitment with anybody, but we get a lot of support, which is great.
I think that's always one of the challenges organizations go through when they look at the process of where they get that support from, is being creative and finding these types of partnerships that you're describing, because while they may not be cash contributions, right, they certainly help in terms of offset what you might need to raise from other places to cover equipment or to cover some of the coaches training and get you better pricing. And having worked with a lot of those organizations over the years, the challenge for them is how many people are pulling at them for donations and equipment and everything. And as much as you want to support everybody, right, there's a limit to what they can do. But I give you credit for building those partnerships, because I think that those are really important. You mentioned a lot of people being familiar with RBI, but not everybody knows about that. So why don't you share with our listeners and viewers what that program consists of?
I'm happy to, as much as I know. So the MLB RBI program is basically their inner city baseball program, where they support community leagues across the United States and into Canada. And they run different programming. So they have their actual baseball leagues that are local, and then under the RBI umbrella, they do different tournaments and contests to, give opportunities to kids who might not have had it otherwise to get noticed, or to play a bit, like to play in tournaments that they get to travel to, and those kinds of things. So they've expanded that to include girls teams. And although we're one of the only all girls leagues around, there's a lot of girls baseball teams that are popping up around the States. And so they've included us, and they're going to start including some girls in different aspects of what they're doing more broadly, I think.
Well, you've had incredible growth in your first few years. Obviously, we know COVID's put things on pause, and hopefully Ontario will start coming out of that role shortly. But as you look ahead now for the next 3 years, as you said, you identified some of the early challenges, and now you're looking ahead. What's on your horizon for the next few years?
We've just introduced some new programming this year that I'm hoping will expand over the next few years. So one of those things is our junior coach program. So for girls who, might be thinking about coaching but don't really have a safe place to be introduced to that, we offer them that space and the training that goes with it. We've also started a junior umpire program for the same reason. So anybody who wants to try umping and isn't necessarily getting certified as an umpire across all leagues in one place, but they'll take our quick, training program and do some actual games with us until they get comfortable. And then, once they feel comfortable, they can move on to where they're going to get yelled at a little bit more than they would in our league. So we're going to expand those programs. We've also started a coach training program across all sports, because we know from all the studies that are out there and from our experience what girls respond to in sport and what girls do not, and why, and how girls are different than boys in sport. And looking at our own inherent biases as adults and how that impacts girls in sports. So we do a coach training program, and it can be sport specific in any sport, or it can just be the more general look at everything. We have different modules that we do, and that's all virtual. And so we'll expand on that too. And then we want to expand across the country. So to every community across Canada, that, for every girl who would like to play baseball, we'd like to offer her a place to play. We're expanding this year to 4 new locations in the country, including a new province. We're in British Columbia this summer, and our numbers are great so far. So we'll just keep going, keep swimming.
Well, you're doing great things. What areas of support? Obviously, the financial support is always crucial and one of the priorities to let you execute your vision. But beyond the financial side, from people in our network and their contacts, what would be the most helpful for them to provide for you?
Well, just emotional support, but also we're always looking for coaches. All of our staff are female, all of our coaches are female, all of our umpires are female. So we're always looking for that. We are, always looking for equipment, whether it's new or used. We always have people who can use it, or ways that we can use it. And then I would say, really that support is important, but if just supporting us, following us on all of our social media pages and those kinds of things would make a big difference to us, because it helps spread the word. A lot of people don't even know that girls baseball exists or is an option. So I think those are good places to start.
Well, you've got some great ideas here, certainly a big vision. So within Canada, how many are you in all of the provinces now?
We are not in all of the provinces. We have 10 provinces, and we have territories too. And we are actually only in 4 of the 10 provinces. right now. So we're working our way across. We are from like as far east as you can go and as far west as you can go, but we have some middle places.
So give people, just so we know, where are you not? Which provinces are you not in right now?
Well, I'll tell you where we are first. So we are
Okay.
in Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia, as well as Ontario and British Columbia. And we have been, before COVID, we were in Manitoba, but we pulled out of there for now just to regroup a little. So we're not in Newfoundland or New Brunswick, which are in the east. And then we're not in Quebec or Alberta or Saskatchewan right now. And then we're not in any of the territories.
Well, we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to make sure that 2021 gets you the right people to start connecting and expanding and see what we can do, because certainly with the amazing work that you're doing, there's no reason that it should not be in those places. So Dan, I want to thank you and congratulate you for everything that you've accomplished.
Thank you. Thank you for talking with me.
And before we let you go, we do want to take a minute to put you on the spot here. We're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers and wave our magic wand, and we're going to appoint you as commissioner of a sport. So tell us what sport that would be.
Well, I mean, I'm in baseball, so I'll choose baseball.
All right, so now you're in charge and you're taking over. What's your first course of action?
Well, I mean, obviously what's missing from baseball now is the women's MLB. So I think that we have to start that, and we've got to recreate a league of their own. I know there's lots of MLBs doing great things for girls and young women these days. There's a lot of different series that they're offering for girls to compete and to show what they can do. So we just need to expand that. And there's a US team, there's national teams around the world in women's baseball. So we can get all the best players from those teams and put together 4 teams and start a women's league. I'll just snap my fingers.
Well, there we go. We'll snap and we'll make these things happen. But it is interesting, right? When you think about it, that at least in the States, for girls, it becomes a focus on softball instead of having them play baseball. And you really wonder why it's developed that way, because you would think that baseball, when you look at the sports, should be a sport that would translate very easily, right? There's not necessarily any gender differences that would require the sport to be softball instead of baseball. I mean, again, as an adult, I played lots and lots of softball. It's a recreational sport at that level, and there have been some attempts to have like women's professional softball, but it's always been curious to me why that hasn't been executed in baseball.
Well, women were banned from baseball in the 1950s, and the ban wasn't lifted until the 1990s. So from professional baseball, and which is kind of ridiculous. There's also the scholarship piece where girls can get scholarships in softball because they were directed into that sport. That's where girls went because they think that they're going to get scholarships. Now there have been a few girls or young women who have received scholarships in baseball in the States. So it seems to be changing slowly, and opportunities are opening up. And now with the MLB supporting leagues like ours, hopefully, it will continue to open. I feel like baseball for girls and women is kind of where hockey was 10 or 20 years ago. So we're far behind. We've got to do a lot to catch up. But yeah, baseball was originally a women's sport and softball was a men's sport, and it changed. And yeah, hopefully it will change back. There's room for both.
Well, there's no doubt that there's room for both, and as you said, it's interesting how that developed. But we're looking forward to helping support your efforts. We'll connect you to some people in Canada that can maybe help that, and would love to see what else we can do in terms of professional baseball and supporting that effort, because I think that's long overdue.
Thank you.
So we want to thank you, Dana, for being with us today. Do you want to tell people how they can get more information about Canadian girls baseball?
Absolutely. It's easy, CanadianGirlsBaseball.com, and we're on social media at Canadian Girls Baseball. You can find us anywhere.
So thank you for joining us today. We want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for taking time to join us for the Sports Philanthropy podcast. This is your host, Roy Kessel, signing off. Please remember to live generously. Thank you.